anything that you can do to streamline that checkout process is only going to help your conversion, which is only going to help your revenue.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook, presented by Details Interactive. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 64, and today's guest is Erik Lautier. Erik's a longtime industry friend, and he's currently a director at AlixPartners. He's my first guest to join the show from the south of France, and also the first one to be both an accomplished actor and opera singer. Erik's had a number of digital marketing roles, and he'll offer up some great insights about the future of digital. Before we get started, a quick thank you, as always, to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by Erik Lautier. Erik is a former professional actor and opera singer who parlayed a career in the performing arts into a web development startup serving the arts and entertainment industries. He has held roles of increasing responsibility in e-commerce and marketing ever since, including multiple C-level executive positions at publicly traded retailers and hypergrowth D2C brands alike. In 2019, Erik pivoted his career towards consulting, and he now serves as a director at AlixPartners, based out of their Paris office. He currently lives in the south of France. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for making the time. So you are a guest. I've done 63 shows or so. You are the first guest that I am doing an interview where the guest resides in the south of France. That must be pretty nice.
Yeah, it's really beautiful here, and we've been here about a year, and we're loving it.
That's fantastic. And you also are the first guest to claim to be a former opera singer and a soap opera star.
Well, I never claimed to be a star on a soap, so I had a very small role, but that lasted over the course of about 5 years, and it was a lot of fun. Paid for my health insurance at the time, and that was ages ago, but it was quite an adventure.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. We usually will get into the first story, kind of how people were brought up, but let's just dig on that professional acting and the opera singer. How did you get into that?
Yeah, I did a musical in high school, and things kind of caught fire there. I got really interested in it, and when I went to college, I discovered very quickly that the only way I was going to graduate is if I majored in drama, because I just couldn't bring myself to study, and it was challenging. But I'd found something that I really loved doing. And so I majored in drama, and as I got more into the acting side, I was taking voice lessons, started singing a lot more, and this operatic voice started to emerge. And ultimately, I went to grad school for opera. And during the summers, when I wasn't in school, I was finding professional work. So I was getting paid as a professional actor and opera singer pretty early on, in my late teens and early 20s. So it sort of just naturally continued from there. After I finished grad school in opera, I moved to New York and found some work.
Well, you have a voice for sure. You can just hear it through the podcast. You should start a podcast of your own with a great voice like that.
I don't think I could pull it off as well as you and some of the others can, Mark.
You starred in Broadway National Touring Company of Beauty and the Beast. That must have been fantastic.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. I grew up partly in the Washington, D.C. area, and I still remember from being a little kid, and my mom would drag me to the Kennedy Center to go watch a show. And I remember these red velvet seats that I would sit in, and I was usually bored to tears watching The King and I or some sort of show like that. And I ended up performing The Beast at the Kennedy Center in DC, and we didn't live in the area anymore. My mom flew up to see it. Woo! And that's emotional
Right.
to kind of, have it all come home like that. It was amazing, to get to do that in that kind of theater, and with that kind of meaning and importance. I was really lucky.
Very nice. The red velvet seats bring back memories for me. I'm thinking that it was Radio City when I was about 5 years old that probably had these red velvet seats, and my grandparents used to take me for the holiday show every year. I remember that as you were talking. So very cool memories. That's great. So you talk about family and all. Where did you grow up?
First, it was the Washington, D.C. sort of metro area. And then after that, we moved to Florida when I was 12. And so spent the rest of my childhood in Florida. And my mom is still there, but I don't spend much time there anymore. After high school, I went to college in North Carolina, went to grad school in Boston, moved to New York, ended up in LA and in Houston before coming to France. So kind of played hopscotch around for a little bit, and we'll see how long we stay here.
Well, you've seen the world, certainly in the United States and now the world. So awesome story. You talk a little bit about in some of the things that I've read. You talk about how you were able to leverage acting and singing into what started to be a first consulting role. What was that like?
It was accidental, right? Like I think a lot of things happen that way, and sometimes you just got to pay attention. And so I had a decent acting and singing career going at the time, and it was early 2000. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm gonna publicize my career, and how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to teach myself web design, and I'm going to build a website for myself, and it's going to have my agent, and here's when I'm on TV next, and just important information that people might want to know. And so I taught myself web design over the course of a few weeks, and it was a site entirely in Flash, right? To put this in proper time context, and I put the site out there and shared it with my network, which of course was via email, right? No social networks back then. And all of a sudden, all these actors and singers started approaching me and asking me to build sites for them, offering to pay me. And so little light bulb went off, and I thought, well, this is something I can do, and actually I'm really into it, really enjoy it. And one day I was on the set of One Life to Live, which is a soap opera that I did, and I was talking to one of the stars. She mentioned to me that she was starting a cosmetics line, and I said, "You have a website?" And she's like, "No." And I was like, "Well, let me show you what I do." And so we went to the control room, which was the only place in the building in 2000 that actually had internet access. Obviously, we weren't accessing on our phones or anything. And I showed her some of the stuff I'd done. She said, "You're hired," like right then. And that became that was my first e-commerce site. We took it e-commerce a couple months later. I built everything on Yahoo Store, and it was amazing because people would ask me, "Hey, can you do this?" And I would say, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And of course, I had no idea, but I would figure it out. And there weren't many other options back then, right? There was no Shopify, there's no Wix, right? You need a website. You got to come to somebody who can figure it out. And so I grew my consulting practice that way. And gradually, I was doing more and more on the web development side and less on the performing side. And I was a lot happier, to be honest. It was a lot more stable, and it was evolving, right? There was this continual new stuff that was happening in digital. And I got to grow up with that. And I got to see sort of the world change around me, which I found fascinating. And then, of course, one day I realized I have no idea what I'm doing, and I was getting more into the business side of things, and I didn't have that background. So that's when I went to business school, got an MBA, and did my best to sort of tie things together.
Yeah, one of the things about doing this podcast for me is I get to talk to a lot of people who have listened, and we've kind of got this my listeners have heard this before. We've got this group of seasoned executives like you and I, let's say, and then we've got, because I do a lot of mentoring and investing in early stage businesses, we've got a lot of younger people. And I think a story like yours is so interesting because it gives people the perspective. If they're early in their career today, they're not quite sure what they want to do. They've started down one path, and oftentimes they feel like, geez, I've started down a path, I can't pivot it. And you've got a great story of starting in acting and singing, and then moving into something that you really didn't know very much about, web design, and parlaying it into a very nice career, which we'll get more into. So good stuff. So you had a stop at a brand called Eden Apparel for LVMH. If I'm correct, that had a very well-known founder, correct?
This little musician known as Bono. Yeah, that guy. Well, listen, in truth, it was his wife, Ali, who was the real founder of the brand. Of course, Bono was involved, and Ali was wonderful and brilliant, but it was chiefly her and Bono that got this thing started. And I was hired as a consultant. I was hired as a consultant to literally build the e-commerce business from scratch. Again, this is pre-Shopify, pre-everything, right? And at that point, I had some pretty decent coding skills. And so I did front end and back end of the site in .NET and SQL Server, and I connected payment gateways and did all of that stuff that, again, back then, you needed somebody like me to actually do. Ended up staying 3.5 years. And Mark, that's the first time that we met, because when I left, I had prepared sort of a summary of what's happening in the web and where we are, and I was preparing that for you because you stepped in then to help the transition.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that full circle, because I forgot where you and I first met. I actually thought it was when you were at Francesca's, but then when I was prepping, I saw that you were at Eden, and Janice Sullivan, who was, I guess, president at the time. She and I worked together at Warnaco, so she had called me and said, I had this great guy, he's leaving. And so, yes, that's how we met, and that was fun. That was an interesting brand.
Yeah.
You refer to, that's kind of around 2010, I think, when you left. So much has changed in 12 years in digital, and we'll talk a little bit about AlixPartners. But where do you see, we're 2022 now, a lot has changed even during COVID about omni-channel. Are there one or two things that you think that are really on the cusp of changing what we're doing in digital?
There's clearly a lot going on. I think one thought I keep coming back to is that in a few years, you and I are going to talk, and we're going to reminisce, and we're going to laugh about the olden days when you actually had to enter information onto the site in order to check out. It just seems so antiquated to me already. And it's felt antiquated for years, because honestly, if I can put my thumb on the screen of my phone and it knows it's me, why can't everything associated with that, including payment, et cetera, automatically be transferred into the checkout process to streamline things? I mean, you talk about removing the friction from the checkout process. One of the things that I despise about shopping on a new site is that, oh God, I'm gonna have to enter my information, and it's gonna ask the same stuff. I mean, that's one of the prime draws of Amazon, right? Is just, I'm gonna buy it in one click and I'm done. It's all about efficiency and convenience for the customer. I anticipate that we're gonna see that grow a lot. We're gonna see a lot of brands adopt that, because anything that you can do to streamline that checkout process is only gonna help your conversion, which is only gonna help your revenue.
I love it. I think that should be your new business, working on the technology of, and we're going to get to a point, and I don't know when it's going to be, where we're just going to think about, what we want to buy. And, I spent 7 years at Steve Madden running the e-commerce business there. And, that was kind of at the time when, voice was becoming a play. And I genuinely thought that we'd get to a point, and maybe we are to some degree, where I would be able to say, okay, Google or OK Siri or whatever, buy for me the black suede shoes, size 10 from Steve Madden, and ship them to home using my X. And magically it would show up at my door. And, I'm not quite sure we're there yet, but that's got to be coming.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think anything that streamlines the process and makes it faster is worth doing and will be done. There are obviously technology hurdles in all of that, but if that's all it is, the solution will be found, right? The only real hurdles are consumer adoption and are people ready for it, et cetera. Technology, I don't think is a realistic hurdle most of the time.
You spent some time at a brand that I grew up with. My grandfather was a big shopper of Lacoste. He always loved the alligator on his shirt. So that was when you were there. Was that mostly a wholesale company?
So, Mark, first I got to correct you. It is a crocodile.
Okay.
And in fact, when I when I would do a speech at a conference or something like that, during the time where I worked at Lacoste, the first question I would flash up on the screen was I would show a picture of the logo and I would say, "What kind of animal is this?" And I would do a show of hands of of crocodile versus alligator. And in the U.S. at least, it was almost always evenly split down the middle. I imagine if we do that in France, they're going to say, "Ah, it's a crocodile." But anyhow, it's that's a very common misconception, is that it's an alligator, not a crocodile. But to get to your actual question, it was an evolving business which had done a very significant portion of its revenue in wholesale, and I was shifting more and more towards retail and e-commerce. I don't know what the balance is now, but I know that there was a lot of motion in those numbers in the years before I showed up and the couple of years that I was there. But it was a fairly sizable direct business at the time.
How do you counsel, companies that, have a business that is wholesale, they want to be direct to consumer? One of the biggest challenges, especially if they're promotional in nature, is balancing that promotion as potentially it impacts their wholesale retailers. How do you help brands think that through?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that part of what goes into this equation is the assortment of product that is offered in a wholesale channel versus a direct channel. There's a timing aspect of this, and I think one very good representation of this would be, for example, Amazon Marketplace versus what you're selling on your own site. Are you going to have an exact match for every single thing that is going on Amazon, and it's going to be the exact same stuff that you have on your site? Every situation is different, and so I don't want to say anything unilateral. There's always the right way to do it. It's going to vary, but I would say largely you're going to want to have some differentiation between those assortments. And you might have the things that are tried and true and they're proven sellers, and you've had them for years, and those are in a sense heroes on Amazon that raise awareness of the brand. It's a discovery mechanism. They have a ton of reviews, so obviously they're going to be surfaced pretty highly there. And they become an entry point into the brand, where then, of course, on your own direct channel, whether that's in store or whether on your own e-commerce site, you're going to have the new arrivals, the new colors, things that just came out. And if somebody wants it, they have to come to you first on that. And in that case, you're maybe not promoting, because newness and promotion are often a bit at odds, as I think they should be. That's one of many ways to handle the situation. And again, every case is going to be different.
If for those of us that have spent a lot of time in retail, we probably all have had to deal with companies that were struggling while we were there. And I think you've worked for a few of those companies along the way. How do you keep your team, yourself, others around the business motivated when you've got a business, whether it's retail or otherwise? How do you keep them motivated?
Yeah, what I would say is that when the CFO comes to me and says, okay, you need to cut 30% of your marketing budget, but oh, by the way, we need you to increase sales online by about 20%. I say, all right, let's do this, right? Like I get charged up by that, and I roll up my sleeves and I say, all right, let's figure this out. That to me, perversely, I find fascinating and interesting, and I want that challenge. And listen, I've worked for businesses that were growing like crazy, and in a sense, that's sort of easy. And you've got this tailwind, and you do pretty much nothing in marketing. And you're like, oh, look, our sales are moving, my marketing's working, right? I think there's something wonderful about being in a much tougher situation and having to come up with every trick in the book. I mean, it's a great stretch for you as an executive, as a marketer, as an e-commerce leader, as a coach, as a mentor. In so many ways, it really, really challenges you. And so I've always responded to those situations with this mindset. As a result, I'm not afraid of going into those situations. You just deal with it because you have to. And it's not for everybody. Listen, some people want to be in a certain type of business, and if things kind of go awry, then they're probably not the people that you want in that turnaround situation. But other people, they're cut from a bit of a different cloth.
I think I worked for that CFO that you referred to.
We all have.
So you did spend some time at BB Stores and Francesca's. In those businesses, what was your title in them?
I had a couple, I guess, but at BB, when I left, I was the chief digital officer. When I left Francesca's, I was the chief marketing officer.
So how would you describe the difference? And I think it evolves with each passing year, but how would you describe the difference between a CDO and a CMO? And maybe the tag-on question there is, where do you see the evolution going of that kind of a role in retailers?
So it's a very good question. I would say there's not tremendous definition around those roles with respect to the titles, nor is there all that traditional career path to get into one versus the other, the way that you would see, for example, with a CFO role, where, okay, majored in accounting and went to work in the finance division and kind of made their way up. And, there's I think a much more linear career path for certain types of roles. You don't see that so much with CDO and CMO. Now, I think the path will become more linear. When you and I went to college, Mark, there was no digital major. I think I graduated the year that Jeff Bezos registered, Amazon.com as a domain name. So, it's a lot different now. But certainly the CMO role at one company could be very much like the CDO role at another company. And it's highly, highly variable, which makes, I think, org structure often a challenge, because somebody's perception of what it's supposed to be at one company, they go to someplace new and all of a sudden things are a little bit different.
And oftentimes these orgs, are really more catered to the people that are in them at that moment in time, as opposed to what the optimal org, should be for the kind of business that you're in. So that whole square peg, round peg in the square hole, or square peg in the round hole, sometimes, presents itself. So, I've had each of those titles. I've had a CDO and CMO, and each time I've had them, they have been different. And what rolled up underneath me was different. Sometimes it included tech, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it included creative, sometimes it didn't. But all times that CFO that you talked about before came knocking at my door. So understood. Do you have a direct-to-consumer business? I enjoy connecting with guests on this podcast because it reminds me what I love to do: strategic and tactical consulting for businesses like yours. If you'd like to speak with me about your business and see how you can add a fresh set of eyes to your team, contact me at mark@detailsinteractive.com. Now, let's get back to the marketing playbook. You had a nice run at Francesca's, and then you leave there and you go back and do some consulting on your own. And then you pivoted that or leveraged that into the role that you have today at AlixPartners. So for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about AlixPartners and your role there.
So AlixPartners is an extraordinary firm. There are about 20-something offices around the world. What they historically have best been known for is restructuring and turnaround work. So AlixPartners is the company that turned around General Motors, and they've done this type of work with a lot of very, very well-known brands out there. But we do a lot of other things, and I am a director there out of the Paris office, and my focus, kind of tying back to my whole background, is over the e-commerce and marketing areas.
And we're recording this, September 2022. We're 2.5 years into COVID, and hopefully things have calmed down a lot more than they had been. Digital business exploded during COVID, but now I think many businesses are seeing that COVID bump. They acquired lots of new customers during that time. Some of them seeing that those customers are not performing the way new customers that they had acquired previously are behaving. So are you seeing a lot of this post-COVID hangover in companies that you're working with?
Well, for sure, it's something that you see generally across the board, right? There are inflationary concerns in a macro sense, but there are many more specific examples of inflation, and maybe not how you and I would describe inflation as a consumer, but inflation in prices of cost per click, for example, on Google is something that a lot of brands are experiencing. They're also often seeing less productivity in some of the social channels. And again, when you have a tailwind, and for e-commerce businesses, COVID was largely a tailwind, you start thinking, oh, well, this is really working. Things are great. We're on fire. But was it the tailwind, or was it the things that you're actually doing? And it's really important to be able to decouple one from the other, just as it's important to be able to decouple the work that you're doing from a headwind when you're facing that. And that I think is what ties into long-term planning, being able to set reasonable targets and goals. But I think a lot of the work that I've been doing lately, whether with AlixPartners or before I joined the firm, was really around how do we get more efficiency out of our marketing spend? How do we structure the team better in order to manage growth or manage other things that are happening in the business? The relationship between the merchandising and marketing, I think, is always a critical one for an e-commerce site to understand. And of course, having a site experience that supports those things. And I find, very often you'll find a brand that has extraordinary marketing, amazing site experience, but maybe the merch isn't quite right. Or it could be you've got great merch, you've got a great site experience, but the marketing is not hitting. And you need one of those things to be off for the entire site to be in trouble. And so being able to tie those things together in a way that's holistic, I think, is extraordinarily important. There are a lot of agencies out there that might specialize in one area. You can find a great marketing agency. You can find an agency that manages the site experience for you. But to find one that can help pull it all together into a very compelling story to the consumer, I think, is a big challenge.
Yeah, I think your call out about inflationary aspects. We're seeing it in businesses that I work with. We are seeing it in cost per click for sure. The privacy issues, certainly impacted what was happening with Meta and other social channels, and also seeing the cost of outbound shipping. And so many of the brands that we work with continue to use free shipping with a hurdle, perhaps, but I'm seeing businesses where outbound shipping costs are up 15% year over year. Same package weight, but that is really eating into profitability. So good calls. I've talked a lot on the show about shiny object syndrome, where we all become enamored with something that is kind of new and fun. What are you seeing that's new and fun in the digital space?
I hear a lot of people talking about AI because maybe they think they should be talking about AI. I think actually applying AI is 99% of the time not the role of the brand. It's the role of the providers that are serving the brand. And for a brand to say, "Oh, we're going to develop this AI stuff to do this or that, the other," I find is often a bit out of line. And it's very difficult to quantify what it's going to do. but it's a buzzword. It's something that people think that they need and they should have. And so I consider that is firmly in the quadrant of shiny objects in my book.
Yeah, it's interesting, and AI, much like other shiny objects have been, it's kind of in favor right now, and there are so many places that it seemingly is playing. It could be as simple as recommendation engines on your site, but one of the areas that's interesting to me, I'm wondering if you've had any experience, is using AI to improve price optimization on sites. We've got items that we need to mark down because we need to move them. I think I'm going to generalize, most businesses are still using the history and the legacy heritage information that the planners and the allocators and whoever is pricing product is using, from their experience. But there is seemingly technology that should help me to understand that if I have a $50 retail item and I have 1,000 units and I know how many I've sold in the past at $50, I should be able to figure out what the optimal price to move through my aged inventory is.
That's accurate, and it's a very good call out. Now, I have not specifically worked on a business that would say real time impact the price of products, and we're talking something similar to Jet, right, or Amazon, I believe, does some of that as well. A lot of the companies I've worked with they're brands, right, and so the price that you see tends to be a little bit more consistent. It's not moving around the way that it would work at maybe another company. But I certainly have seen opportunities to apply what you're talking about. And I'll give you one example. There was a company I was looking at where no matter what the item was that was on markdown, it was always, say, 50% off. And it could have literally one unit left, and they could move that unit probably at 10% off or 20% off, keep it in the markdown section, and gain a little bit of margin in the process. But just sort of as a simplification, they said, okay, everything that's on sale is 50% off, as opposed to having something that takes into account sales velocity, historical trends, remaining inventory, we supply, et cetera, those types of things, all important inputs for whether it's a more sophisticated algorithm that you're describing, or really just a elbow grease type of approach to, we're going to manually impact what the prices are of our products that are either on promotion or full on in clearance, in order to maximize both the sales potential, but also the margin dollars that we're going to get from those sales.
Last tough question before we get to some layups, and I always call it the A word, attribution.
No.
You hit it a bit before, but let's talk about and we could talk for hours about attribution and media mix. Is this something that you're trying to help your clients with, how to best understand where to take their available marketing budget and spend it to optimize whatever they're trying to optimize for your, top line sales or return on ad spend?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a rather considerable part of the work that I've done, is trying to balance the funnel, right? There are brands out there that are maybe too top heavy on the funnel, and it ends up not being very productive from a ROAS perspective, and they don't necessarily have some of the things that you need lower funnel to capitalize on the brand awareness and the traffic that you've driven. And then, of course, there are brands that have the opposite problem. They are only doing bottom of funnel because maybe there's a dictate that ROAS has to be above a certain number, and maybe there's a goal tied to that, which can be a short-sighted way of approaching things. Because listen, if you say, Erik, we need you to get conversion over 3%. Well, I guarantee you I can do that. I'll just stop marketing, right? Or I'll only do email marketing, or I'll do things that are super, super productive. Hey, affiliates can be over 3% all day long, right? And so having the right balance of spend across these initiatives, I think, is very important. But I also think that from sort of the highest levels in the organization, even the board level, an understanding of having balance across the funnel is critical. And it means very different things for ROAS depending on the initiative that you're investing in. I also think that it's very important for brands to understand the relationships between channels within the funnel. Because something that is a one-to-one ROAS, which on the surface and on paper may not look so good, is the thing that makes the 10-to-1 ROAS 10-to-1 instead of maybe 7-to-1. And so you can't look at these channels in a silo. You have to understand the relationships that they have with one another. And there are tools to do that, right? I mean, we're talking about attribution. There are tools even in Google Analytics, right? There are I forget the name of the tool, but it's the contribution to conversion or the assisted conversions tool in Google Analytics, which I absolutely love, to see what this channel did somewhere further up the funnel is one of the fundamental inputs that you have to take into consideration when you're looking to rationalize spend across the marketing channels.
Yeah, and that assisted analysis is so interesting to me, because when it first developed, you'd look at the lion's share of your paths, and they were much shorter than they are now. Over time, as people became more sophisticated, there were more points of contact, and people were researching. I think it's elongated the number of touch points along the way. So that's why we always leave attribution to the end, because nobody ever really wants to talk about it. So
yeah, have you run across this is, I guess, 64th, and I didn't actually come up with a solution for you. Has anybody figured it out? Please tell me.
No, nobody's figured it out. We all have our own little methods of madness. So. All right. Well, we're getting to the end of the show. We do this 2-minute drill, 7 questions, 1 or 2 word answers. You ready?
You got it.
Okay. A brand that you admire or that inspires you?
Lacoste.
And now we know it's a crocodile. The favorite app on your phone?
Fantasy football.
Okay. You're getting ready for fantasy football.
Oh, I'm ready.
And you're in France, so you're watching games in the middle of the
I'm
night,
not
I
watching.
imagine. Oh, you're
No,
not
I'm not watching. I'm sleeping. Okay. I have to wake up to the bad news.
All right. Last website other than Amazon that you shopped from?
Collins Publishing.
Okay.
I know this is supposed to be a 1 or 2 word answer, but
that's okay.
It was a book that I had to get for my kids for school, and it was not available on Amazon. So I had to literally go to the publisher's website and order it.
That's HarperCollins, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But it was collins.co.uk, I believe, was the website.
Okay. Something that you're not good at, but wish that you were?
I wish I were a little more fearless.
Oh, okay. Charitable organization that you're passionate about?
Anything related to pets.
If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Flight.
And other than family, what's your most prized possession?
All right, maybe this is cheating a little bit, but I would say it's anything that I have from the past that relates to family. It's old family pictures. It is old letters. It is anything that helps me feel more rooted in my family and the long line of people that basically led to me.
I like that one. Where can people reach out to you on social media, Erik?
So I am mainly a LinkedIn and Facebook guy, and I am at Lautier on both of those. Lautier.
Okay, great. And we'll have all that in the show notes. So this was great. It was nice to see you again. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you could be out on the beach somewhere in the south of France, and perhaps we'll come visit someday. I think I mentioned my wife and I had an amazing trip to the south of France years ago, and definitely one of our most favorite spots.
Awesome. Well, you are welcome anytime.
That's it. Today's game ball goes to Erik Lautier for coming on the Marketing Playbook. To me, today's 3 game-winning marketing plays were as follows. Number 1, Erik has been thinking hard about the future of shopping. In his mind, we're going to be able to touch your finger to your phone over the product you want, and with that, the item will be charged to your method of payment and then will be shipped. No adding of data to a checkout path, all with the intention of reducing friction in the shopping experience. Number 2, you too can be a digital marketer and consultant. All you need to be able to do is to sing. Well, as you've heard before, just because you start your career down on a path does not mean that you're destined to stay on that path for life. Erik speaks about his early days and how he leveraged his personal experiences to build out a solid career. And number 3, I loved Erik's comment about the CFO who comes in and asks you to do things that are seemingly impossible. As he said, don't be afraid. Just deal with it because you have to. Everything we're asked to do is not going to be easy. Take some time to think through the options and then systematically establish a game plan. You'll make some mistakes along the way, but the challenge will be refreshing. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter at Details Interact and learn more at detailsinteractive.com. Until next time, the devil is in the details.